Talk Boxing News.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend picks. Earlier this week, I already talked about Tina Ruprecht's upcoming fight and how I expect her to, at minimum, win a points decision in spite of how much time she spent away from the ring, away from the action. Got Tina Ruprecht winning a points decision against Rocio Gaspar over there in Germany, retaining her WBC minimum weight title on the undercard of Warrington versus Lopez. I have Rhiannon Dixon winning a points decision over Christy Shergold. Rhiannon's an athletic southpaw, a crafty one, and she can punch, she can, but conservatively, I'd go with Rhiannon Dixon on points before I go with Rhiannon by way of knockout. Also on the undercard, Shannon Courtenay will be making her ring return, and I have Shannon Courtenay stopping Gemma Rueg. Shannon Courtenay has always packed a decent-sized right hand. She lands it enough times, she might be able to get Gemma Rueg out of there. On that same card's co-feature, the co-main event to the main event, the long-awaited, long-anticipated showdown, the civil war between Australian imports, Shotgun, Shannon O'Connell, and reigning IBF bantamweight champion Ebony Bridges, the Blonde Bomber. Highlight fight of the night for me. The fight with the most potential to result in a barn burner once the fists fly. The fight with the most potential to end in a knockout. There's a lot of bad blood between these two, and up until this point, it's really just been an ideological debate between them. A war of ideologies, a war of words. Tomorrow, they're gonna let their fists do the talking. Can Ebony Bridges win this fight? This is a greater threat even than Maria Cecilia Roman was to the Blonde Bomber. Shannon O'Connell, she's a big puncher. She's certainly more experienced as a professional than Ebony. Ebony, she's not everybody's cup of tea. She certainly isn't Shannon's. But Ebony, unlike a lot of the fighters that Shannon O'Connell has been facing, Taylor Robertson, Sugar Neeks, Kylie Fulmer, Ebony's actually a heavy-handed puncher. Somewhat shorter and stumpier than Shannon, but are still a bigger puncher than Shernika Johnson and Taylor Robertson. I actually recall Shannon O'Connell facing a shorter, stumpier fighter before, in the then unbeaten Bianca Elmire, who gave Shannon O'Connell all she could handle. She was a scrapper, a mid-range to inside fighter, the same way that Ebony Bridges is a mid-range to inside fighter, though I will admit that Ebony Bridges is further along now than Bianca Elmire was then. We'll also admit that I think Ebony Bridges is overall a better fighter than Bianca and a bigger puncher, with a better corner. I know she's fucking hot. She's got big tits and a nice ass, great legs. But when you get past all the bells and whistles and the eye candy, Ebony Bridges actually is a skilled pressure fighter. Shannon O'Connell ate a lot of right hands in that Bianca Elmire fight. A lot of looping right hands, and it just so happens that Ebony Bridges has a quality looping right hand. But not just a quality looping right hand, she's got a pretty good left hook too. Bianca Elmire was a novice fighter with just a handful of fights ahead of that Shannon O'Connell fight. In spite of that, she still gave Shannon all she could handle. She fights at about the same range as Ebony Bridges. That's mid-range to inside, in the pocket. Deep in the pocket. Shannon O'Connell was facing a novice boxer with height disadvantages, reach disadvantages, not dissimilar from what we're going to see tomorrow with Ebony. But Ebony is a more defensively responsible fighter than Bianca Elmire. Ebony keeps those hands high and fights on a swivel, moves that torso, moves that head. She's not as wild, not as scrappy, not as chippy as Bianca Elmire. I think that Ebony can put forth a better version of Bianca Elmire's game plan than Bianca put forward. I'm going with Ebony Bridges to win a points decision against Shotgun Shannon O'Connell. She's got some of the same ingredients that Bianca Elmire had, and some that she didn't. A lot of people felt that Bianca had done enough to win that fight, but in that fight, Bianca was the B-side fighter. Shannon was the A-side, whereas in this fight with Ebony, Ebony's the A-side and Shannon's the B-side. Ebony's the house fighter. Shannon won't have that advantage. Shannon O'Connell, who's at her best, shifting all her weight to her front foot as the aggressor, as the defender, she's vulnerable. We saw that in the Bianca Elmire fight. We saw that in the Helen Joseph fight. Granted that should Shannon O'Connell beat those feet, navigate the ring, she could make it difficult for Ebony to close the gap and get mid-range to inside on her. But given the bad blood between them, I don't get the sense that Shannon's going to fight a defensive fight. I don't think she's going to make herself hard to find for Ebony. For Ebony, mid-range to inside is where you want to be. That's Ebony Bridges' sweet spot. Mid-range to inside, the shorter fighter with the shorter arms will have the advantage. It just so happens that Shannon O'Connell has been stopped there before off a clean clean left hook Helen Joseph landed. You know who else has a good left hook? Ebony Bridges.
Don't misunderstand me. Shannon O'Connell is dangerous, and I do think this is a more challenging fight than the Maria Cecilia Roman fight was.
And I don't think that Shannon O'Connell had the malicious intent for either Bianca Elmire or Helen Joseph, for that matter, that she currently harbors for Ebony Bridges.
Shannon is battle-tested. She's a strong puncher, but she does need more room, more real estate to get off her power shots than Ebony does.
Shannon's power shots, while devastating, can be wide and they can be countered. I expect that Ebony Bridges will look to work mid-range to inside, deep in the pocket, catch and shoot.
Catch and counter. Catch her clean.
We'll admit that what's working against Ebony Bridges is that Shannon is a little taller, a little longer, definitely more experienced, more rounds in the bank, having gone the distance more times with more fighters than Ebony has. Ebony's gas tank could betray her, depending on the pace of the fight, so she has to pace herself.
But I think she can do it. I think she can win. She's got a great corner in Mark Tibbs.
And let's be honest, Shannon is overlooking her. She is underestimating her.
I could be wrong, but I'm taking it on faith that Ebony Bridges has amassed enough professional experience that she can give Shannon what for.
I'm going with Ebony Bridges to retain the blue belt and win a points decision tomorrow in Leeds. Ebony Bridges on points is the pick. Then come to the main event of that same card, the IBF featherweight title fight between the reigning champion Josh Warrington and his mandatory challenger Luis Lopez. You really can't spell Warrington without war, can you?
No, you can't.
Is that what we should expect tomorrow? Will tomorrow's fight between Josh and Luis end the same way that Josh's fight with Mauricio Lara ended, the first time out?
I think the odds makers have Luis Lopez, the betting favorite, going into this thing. I think they're favoring Josh Warrington to lose the red and gold belt tomorrow in Leeds.
Josh Warrington, who sports a professional record of 31 wins with 1 loss, 1 draw, 8 knockouts, having been knocked out once. Just once at the hands of Mauricio Lara, who I just mentioned. Opposite the ring, Luis Lopez of Mexico.
Sports a professional record of 26 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 15 knockouts, having never been knocked out.
Luis Lopez is on a winning streak. You know, his last 3 fights ended by way of knockout.
Gave Gabriel Flores his first professional loss, Isaac Lowe his first professional loss.
Luis Lopez is a stud. He's a stallion, and for this reason, most people aren't picking Josh Warrington to win that fight, but
I'll tell you something, it's not often I change my mind. I, like many of you, had Josh Warrington losing tomorrow's Lopez fight, but upon further analysis, upon further review, I beg to differ.
This assignment is not dissimilar from the 2 Kiko Martinez fights that Josh Warrington had. The 2 Kiko Martinez fights that Josh Warrington won. This assignment really isn't that dissimilar from that assignment.
And we know that Kiko Martinez has world-class power. He can really crack. He can really take a guy out. You see what he did to Jordan Gill in his last fight.
But before that, who stopped him? I'll tell you who stopped him. Josh Warrington stopped him.
And I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me that, well, Kiko's a lot older than he was the first time out.
But opposite the ring, a younger Kiko Martinez 5 years ago, Josh Warrington. He pulled out the W then. I think tomorrow he can do that again. There are similarities between Luis Lopez and Kiko Martinez that make this assignment doable.
Luis is a shorter, stumpier guy, aggressive guy, the same as Kiko.
You say that Josh Warrington, he's not the biggest puncher, he's not big on power, but neither was Ruben Villa when he decisioned Luis Lopez.
Ruben Villa was only 15-0 at the time. Josh Warrington has twice as many fights, twice as much experience.
I believe that Josh is going to alternate from being the aggressor to being the defender. He'll assert himself in spots and navigate the ring in others.
Using his height advantage and his reach advantage against Luis Lopez, who's got to get close to him first before he can do anything. I believe the strategy will be similar to what we saw in the Kiko Martinez rematch earlier this year.
It's not often I change my mind. I, like many of you out there, favored Luis Lopez to win this thing, and win this thing by way of knockout at first sight. But upon further review, further analysis, this is right up Josh Warrington's alley. He's had an assignment like this before.
No, I don't think Josh Warrington takes the best punch.
There is a chance, a good one, that Luis Lopez connects and takes him out. He's a vicious puncher, a spiteful one.
But there's also a chance that Josh Warrington does crack a little harder than a pubescent Gabe Flores. He certainly has more experience in the ring than that guy did.
More experience than Ruben Villa, who beat Luis Lopez.
Ruben Villa was a novice at the time he fought Luis, and don't forget that Ruben Villa's bread and butter is his boxing, not his brawling.
Ruben Villa's not big on power.
He beat Luis Lopez nonetheless, won a points decision.
I will admit I'm not as confident in this pick as I am in some others.
I could be completely off base. I could be completely wrong, and Luis Lopez goes in there, trounces this guy, trashes him the same way Mauricio Lara did. I could be wrong.
I've been wrong before. I don't dodge my comeuppance, but when I look at this thing, there are noticeable similarities in this assignment and Josh Warrington's previous
I
assignments.
anticipate that this will be somewhat harder than Josh's last fight, his rematch with Kiko Martinez, because this is a younger guy who's a bit faster, a little bit more explosive.
Angles off and moves his torso a little more than Kiko does. But I think Josh Warrington lets his hands go enough that he can fight this guy off in spots and then start to beat those feet, get back to his boxing, and manage the distance between them. I think he can alternate well enough between offense and defense.
Remember, Josh Warrington knows how to beat those feet.
He wants to, he does. Might seem like a long shot, but I'm going with Josh Warrington to win.
I'm going with Josh Warrington to hang on to and retain the red and gold belt tomorrow in Leeds. I think he can pull it off.
Warrington to win is the pick. We then come to Terrence Crawford's big ring return to his hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, opposite the ring, David Avanesyan. This is not exactly the kind of fight you have to spend a lot of time on, because one of these guys is classified as one of the pound-for-pound best boxers in the sport. Regardless of where you rank him on most periodicals, he's there. And then you have David Avanesyan, a solid,
Serviceable welterweight.
it's a tune-up fight for Terrence Crawford, that's what it is. And there are worse guys to tune up with than David Avanesyan, who is one of the more solid welterweights in today's welterweight division. But opposite the ring, a pound-for-pound fighter, a pound-for-pound talent, a three-division, two-time lineal, two-time Ring Magazine, former undisputed, current reigning WBO champion.
Well, you know, he might seem like cannon fodder to a lot of people.
I'll say this much. I think Terrence Crawford is going to let it go a couple of rounds before he goes in for the kill. Terrence Crawford, even in high-level fights with high-level fighters, characteristically takes him about 2 to 3 rounds to really get warmed up, get his distance down, and figure a guy out. We might see that tomorrow. He does have some ring rust he needs to shake off, and that's the whole point of this thing. Tuning up so that he doesn't sit out the entire calendar year ahead of what he at least wants to be the Errol Spence Jr. fight.
Most people approach that subject with a lot of pessimism, a lot of skepticism, myself included.
But that's still what he's looking to do. He wants to tune up with this guy and go right back into it with that guy and see if they can't get that fight over the line. I'm not optimistic.
David Avanesyan is a characteristically aggressive fighter, has some punching power, though the only thing I think he has working for him in this fight is that Terrence Crawford has been out of action about a year, a little over a year.
It's been a little over a year since the Sean Porter WBO mandated title fight, mandated title defense. Terrence Crawford lived up to my expectations then. I told you guys a long time ago, 2 to 3 years ago, that Terrence Crawford would be the first man to stop Sean Porter. I think he's going to stop David Avanesyan tomorrow.
Like I said, he's going to let it go a couple of rounds because he's got ring rust he needs to shake off. He needs to bank those rounds.
No, pick him off long distance while he's on the fly. Sharpshoot him out of either the southpaw or orthodox stances. Turn him.
Walk him into punches.
It's unfortunate this has to go head-to-head with Teofimo Lopez's fight on ESPN opposite the ring, Sandor Martin.
But yeah, I, like many of you, have Terrence Crawford knocking out David Avanesyan. It's just a question of when.
When it comes to Teofimo Lopez versus the late replacement from Spain, Sandor Martin, a characteristically mobile fighter, an outside jabber, a southpaw.
He's a little bigger than Teofimo Lopez to the eye, too. Teofimo might have been big at lightweight, but it's super lightweight.
He looks the smaller man next to a lot of guys. He looks the smaller man opposite Sandor Martin.
Sandor's not a power guy. He's not an artillery guy. At his best, he's a boxer, a moving target.
Which could create a problem for Teofimo because Teofimo, he's not a pressure guy. He's not a volume guy. He's not a prolific puncher. He's more of a sharpshooter. 1 and 2 punches at a time. 1 and 2 well-placed shots to hurt the guy, then go in for the kill. That could be hard to do opposite the ring, a man who's going to use the ring and move lateral. So can Teofimo do it? I will say there's a banana skin energy associated with this fight because of the stylistic matchup and because Sandor is a late replacement. Though because Sandor is not a knockout puncher.
And because Sandor Martin's economic too.
Lopez is the house fighter. All Lopez has got to do is look busier than Sandor. All Lopez has got to do is hold the center of the ring, make Sandor come to him, because if Sandor spends too much time on the outside, he's going to give up the round.
Sandor at his best is not a busy fighter. It's not a busy puncher. He spends most of the fight on his back foot characteristically, and that's Sandor at his best.
You fight that fight for too long in a round, you may lose it. And I think it's going to be Teofimo on the front foot, coming forward, trying to close the gap on Sandor Martin.
Sandor's a good boxer. He upset the apple cart for a very inactive and flabby, fat and flabby, Mikey Garcia. But Teofimo...
He's not fat and flabby. He's got no ring rust he needs to shake off. He fought earlier this year. He's got decent feet. You know, he was able to turn with Vasil Lomachenko.
It really bothered Lomachenko. Lopez, he's got feet. When he wants to, he does.
He fights in bursts. He's explosive. Looks to land punches that the other guy doesn't see. Well-timed punches, well-placed punches.
He doesn't have to knock out Sandor Martin. He doesn't have to ragdoll him either. He just needs to be busier to win the rounds. And because Sandor spends so much time moving lateral and fighting off the back foot, it's entirely possible that Teofimo Lopez can eke out a points decision. He is the house fighter.
The Sandor, crafty boxer, crafty pure boxer and southpaw that he might be. Don't forget, this guy lost the decision to Anthony Yiggett. Anthony Yiggett's no power puncher.
He decisioned Sandor Martin some years ago. I understand that Sandor pulled off a decent-sized upset over Mikey Garcia, but the circumstances in that fight really are different than the circumstances in this one.
Stylistically, I think it's a frustrating style matchup for Teofimo Lopez, but I think he can get the job done. He just needs to be busier than Sandor, who likely won't want to spend much time in the pocket with Teofimo, as that would favor Teofimo.
Teofimo's got good timing, good speed in those hands, good power.
I'd be thoroughly impressed if Teofimo could stop Sandor Martin.
Sandor's been beat 2 times already, but he's never been stopped. If Teofimo stopped him, that'd be a statement.
Sandor doesn't seem the least bit bothered by Teofimo's gamesmanship. He looks up for this, and I like that. We're in for a good fight.
Though ultimately, I think it's a fight Teofimo Lopez can win. I think it's a fight Teofimo Lopez will win. I'm going with Teofimo on points.
Lopez on points, conservatively.